Train fans come here. Are there fans of the new train yet? Because, hey,
yes.
I know there's a lot of fans of the old one, but the new one, still kind of a little shaky. Not played too much in the pro scene. Teams are still kind of ironing out the kinks, maybe waiting for other teams to develop strats. And we have the theorycraft legend, commentator extraordinaire Anders with us. I know you were a big fan of this map when it used to be in the rotation. So just tell me how you're feeling and how you think this train's played out so far.
I mean, I'm still a fan of Train, yes. Train and Nuke for historically have been my favorite maps, I think, going way back to 1.6 and that stuff. So something about the maps I really enjoy. New version has some challenges, but I think on the whole, it still plays very much like some of the main parts that I love about Train. So I like it. I think it's in a decent state, and I think you're right that a lot of teams... I actually think smartly, it's better to let somebody else use the energy to figure out how to play the map and then just copy what they're doing. Like, that is the best way to use your resources sometimes.
Especially when you're traveling around so much, like some of the other teams around. Harry, what do you think before I jump to your little meme slide?
Yes, I mean, a lot of my gripes with it are explained on the meme slide, basically. Because I think Anders is right. Straight to First of all, why are the trains gone? It's called Train. Where have the trains gone? And... because I think the thing with Train is that it does play very similarly to the old one. Like, the layout is still very, very similar. They've just kind of taken some of the heart out of it, kind of the soul of just kind of pissing about on ladders with your friends in a pub or something. Like, it doesn't really affect a pro game because the only time you'd go on a ladder is maybe like a top blue entry path thing or something, right? In the old Train. New Train, it's just not there. It's just a few things. It's just less fun. Pop Dog is less fun now. I hate long corridors where you have to hold W the whole way. No one wants to be holding W in a narrow corridor on CS. It's just Ivy now. You've just got two Ivies. It's less.
It's also like four different corners you have to check on the way out.
But I do think it's more fun than what we had before. And I think even if maps aren't perfect, I think I'd much rather have maps rotating in and out. And I think that's the main point with Train coming back in, is that I'd happily have a map out every year. Maybe even after every major would probably be a little bit much because teams have to play so much. But I think overall, it still plays very similarly to the old map. And I was also Train, Nuke, Overpass. Those are my three GOAT maps, just for similar reasons, probably. I like CT-sided maps. I like things like that. So
yes.
That's where we're at with Train. But I think on the next slide we can see what's happening, and it's that pro teams at the moment aren't playing it that much. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I think, first of all, like Anders was saying, let the tier 2, let the tier 3 teams theorycraft. Don't risk it in an important tournament. But also, we did see a kind of higher take-up for Anubis Ancient, which were completely new maps. I think there's something maybe in why top teams at big events, why we're not seeing Train as much. And I guess open it up. I don't know what you guys think. Why do you think that? Because it's basically Vertigo numbers.
I'm just glad to see that it still somehow beats Vertigo, because nobody likes Vertigo.
But when Vertigo came out, it felt like we just never saw it for the first 3 months. So this chart is basically... I tried to get similar map sample rather than similar time span, just to try and make it more fair. Because I was like, okay, well, maybe it's just because Train, no one played it at Bounty, blah, blah, blah. Like, it looks bad on the day count. But even when I looked at map count, it's the same trend of 5% of games on Train. Like, that's very low. Like, I looked just before the show, we were talking, and I looked at it, and Train was the most played map with Mirage over 2016 and 2017. Like, it was a very popular map back then. And then obviously it dropped off, hence its removal. But this is a worrying start for it, I think. And I don't know if it's just a time thing.
I'm going to be honest. I think the nice interpretation, like we said, is that it's smart to let somebody else spend the resources on figuring out. I know because I do this a lot. I run around on a server on my own and throw grenades. And, sometimes you can do that for 5 hours in a row and find essentially nothing. And you're like, oh, that's cool. And it's wasted 5 hours of my time to solve no problems at all. And obviously when you find something, in theory, you found it for everybody because, as everyone benefits from, if you spend 5 or more hours, so you spend 10 hours in total, it's yeah, but the other person who, you play against, they watch the demo immediately and they say, oh, that's cool. So they, they had to spend an hour playing you, and then they know as well how that works. So that's the nice way of saying it. I think the other thing that's worth keeping in mind, I think a lot of pro teams are just so a little bit lazy in terms of they just do what they're used to doing, you know, like there's no nice way of saying it, but you know, even on maps that are played a lot, if you go and look at them, this has been really shocking to me. Like I've spent a lot of time in the last 2 or 3 months really sort of just trying to investigate a lot of my own assumptions about the game and, you know, what I think I know and all the rest of it. And sometimes I think there's got to be people who throw grenades for this, or there's got to be some protocol for it. And you realize, like, there just isn't. Like, people just, they pick the certain spots to fight in on maps, and then they fight for those spots. But if the fights happen somewhere else, it's like there's no plan there. Like, nobody really knows much of anything. Like, I've been railing about the fact that nobody knows how to throw grenades into the B-bomb side on Inferno from the CT side. Like, from CT spawn, I haven't found a team yet that knows how to do anything that's even remotely interesting. And, you know, one of the problems is you might not have any grenades on Inferno at that point. If you're retaking it, that's fine. But, like, even when they do, you can tell it's just all made up on the spot, more or less, or it's the same 2 flashbangs or something. So I think that's something that happens a lot, is that, you know, and I would say Train is a very, very demanding map for both sides, but maybe especially for the CT side, because you end up having these like somewhat unique 4-1 openings where you've got 4 people on the A-bomb side, 1 person on the B-bomb side. That's one, if you don't have somebody who's comfortable playing the B-bomb side, you're already in trouble. Like, you're already in, like, you know, you're in deep shit already, because that person has so much responsibility. Like, they have to call in the defense when something goes wrong. They have to survive. They have to use their grenades really well. If they have an incendiary and they throw too deep or whatever on the B stairs there, they're going to die, and then it's all over. So it is, I think it's a map that plays very, very differently from a lot of other maps. So yeah, it's got some challenges against it, but I'm actually not worried. I'm pretty sure the map will pick up in popularity, so I'm not really scared for it at the moment, to be honest.
It's I was reading a lot of quotes from players, what their initial impressions were between Bounty, Kato, a couple of like the round table at ESL ran at Kato as well, and a lot of the general sentiment is that it does play pretty similarly to the old Train, but there's certain like micro things that have changed. So the biggest thing I think that was highlighted by like 4 different people was that the way they've changed a yard with the Train being angled now doesn't really let the T's stop anyone from getting into pop, and the removal of the pop ladder and that timing change essentially then has like a domino effect on like the way the rest of the map is played as well. So like Brown Halls itself isn't that different, but just because of the way CTs can now get into pop, it's changed a little bit. Ivy is also like a little bit harder to play because now you have someone who can be like on the A bomb train and also be looking Ivy, but also be helping A. So you like permanently have another person being able to hold both. Like there's a couple of things that have changed with all of that, but even then, like the map itself still can play similarly. It's just harder to actually get to the stage of the round that you used to be able to get to much easier. Like the mid round where teams can actually like influence rotations and play around a little bit. It's not as easy to get to anymore because you have like the instant CT, like CTs can instantly smoke T-mid from spawn. Whereas before you could only do that by going to Z and then like chucking a smoke at the walls. Like there's a lot of things that have changed in that regard as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that new pop dog situation that everyone, I don't really find many people who say that they love it. I find like either people have no opinion or they really hate it, I feel like, but not a lot of people say, oh yeah, it's really, and you're right, like those long corridors are just, it's always a weird kind of gamble to take if you're walking down, like in high-level Counter-Strike, you know, you never know what you're going to find there. But it does put a lot of pressure on the T side as well. Like there is something weird about watching people try and do a B execute on this version of Train, and you notice like how paranoid they are looking behind them all the time. And it's like, in a way, it's true that if you miss the timing on somebody holding that by even like 1 second, then the whole round is over for the T side, right? So it becomes, I would argue, easily the most important part of the map is the back haul, like what people call like up dog now, I guess, that long position.
Yeah, I know. Not sticking on. But I think it's one thing I really enjoyed in the early games was when teams were pushing up a B quite a lot and trying to set up that crossfire, the kind of the pop dog to, I guess, the top of the B ramp with the early smoke. And then I think as time's gone on, that's happened less and less because it's just, like anything, is cyclical, right? But I think it does add some dimensions to it. And I think by the end of Train, maybe the ladder was getting a little bit, like everyone had so many different tricks that it was quite difficult to kind of stay in there as a CT. Because I think
double molly combo off the
roof. Because and especially with CS2 utility as well, it's just It's just I don't like getting rid of the ladder. I'm going to keep coming back to it. I don't like getting rid of the ladder. Just because as a CT, like if you're rushing Pop Dog, that needs to be a risk, but it also needs to be worth it, right? And I think the way they've changed the spawns means that you can get into Pop. But I saw some teams throwing like a smoke from spawn, like just like where you would normally throw a sandwich smoke. They smoke Pop Dog, like just so that if you want to push, you have to push ahead of the smoke into the bit like where there's no cover, just in front of Pop Dog. And it's like, if we're using default utility on this, like one of your 5 smoke grenades is just to stop CTs pushing Pop Dog. Like it just feels kind of bad. But yes, I think by the time the mid round settles, it plays exactly the same as if there was a ladder there most of the rounds. So I do think it's workable for sure.
I said at the start I like the map and everything, and I do, but like I think the criticism for the crooked train or whatever it is, the derailed train out in the A yard is like, apart from how it might work in terms of the map, it just also does look out of place. Like it does sort of look like a map designer said, we need like a barrier to put here, you know, that's gonna sort of cover the early fight, because otherwise the Ts and CTs are fighting each other as soon as you hit the connector. So it does almost feel like somebody said, like, okay, let's just put a train in, and then, you know, we'll tilt it a little bit, and then it's all good. There is some, even just aesthetically, there is something slightly weird about that. I have some other just random criticisms to throw out there. Maybe nobody actually cares about this, but there are so many windows on train that are like, they're ceiling windows that they're like an amalgamation of like broken windows and half broken windows and fully, you know, just like broken windows. And it means if you're trying to throw grenades, whether you're on the T or the CT side, through some of those ceilings in the B bomb side, but it also happens like on like that up dog position or whatever we want to call it. Like there's just a lot of places where that happens, and you have no way of knowing whether or not your smoke grenade is actually going to go through the ceiling or not, because it's just so annoying. And I don't understand why we're introducing that element. Like either make the windows smokable or not. Like, but this weird thing where it's like sometimes they'll roll over and they'll fall in, and sometimes they'll just roll over and explode on the roof instead. I just don't understand what the purpose is of that. Like aesthetically, but the thing is, you can have the aesthetics without even having the dynamic. You can just make it so that they fall through. So even if you wanted the aesthetic, you can keep it, but you just can make the game so that the grenades will always go through, or they won't go through, depending on whatever you want from a map design point of view. That's one of my criticisms. And then I have another criticism that I just think is, but this is true on so many Counter-Strike maps, and it's a very niche thing. Maybe I'm the only person that cares about this, but, you know, you said, where are the trains? You could make another meme slide that's called, like, where are all the corners in Counter-Strike? Because there just are no corners left. Or every corner that's supposed to be somewhat of a right-angle corner that you should be able to step back into and set up, like, any kind of grenade or anything, when you back into it, you realize it's not a corner at all. It's this weird slope that's been clip-brushed out of the corner. And they do it, logically, they do it because they don't want new players to get stuck on, you know, little bumps on the map. So they clip brush all the bumps out so that you can walk along a wall and you never get stuck, basically. And that's fine. But the problem is, if you do it everywhere, then you take away one of the functions of having a corner for like a high level Counter-Strike player, which is to set up grenades. You say, oh, I'm going to back into this corner, I'm going to look at this thing, and I'm going to throw certain grenades. But now there's no backing into any corners anywhere because they're all just these weird slopes. So I just don't like that. But that applies to a lot of Counter-Strike right now.
I think the glass thing is especially interesting because, like, the philosophy of CS2, like, overarching is always, like, the skyboxes are all gone. It's all about finding these spawn smokes and everything like that. And I just think that's something it's got to change, surely. Like, the whole point of CS2 is you're able to find these wacky utility from everywhere. And the only thing is, if they think it would be OP, like, they're mainly on inner, right? Those windows. So the only thing is, if they think it'd make life for a B anchor too tough or something, like, I can only think of a defense is if they're trying to make it deliberate, to just make B a bit easier. But I'm not sure.
And they can open up some of the gaps towards T-spawn, or lower the buildings in T-spawn so that there's more ability to throw like instant smokes on T side, because right now it's super limited. Yeah. And you have like, it's just so hard because if you're shut out of A main, you're sitting there for like 40 seconds. It's just ultra boring. There's no options. And they either stack B or Ivy, and then you're kind of screwed. They also, the other thing is that with 6 train, they removed the ladder to go up. So that's one option you can't really do. But then you can also only peek from the right side now towards T-mid. So like, they're just taking away some of the options and things that made this map like a little more dynamic and unique. And to me, that's just like, it ruins a little bit of the fun of it. And there's also like, when you go through Ivy, like when you come through Ivy as a T, you then have to check like left and right as usual. But then if you try and go right into A, you're then channeled through like 2 choke points where you can only go one by one.
Yeah.
You can't really have team play. You can't trade properly. Like you're funneled in really awkward ways. And it just doesn't really lend itself to like some of the more open gaps in the old version where you actually could play off teammates a little bit more. I mean, that kind of ties into the fact that like teams right now aren't picking this, like we were saying earlier. It is partially because they are probably waiting for some other teams to work out things. Like I think Twist mentioned that against Eternal Fire when they played, they kind of had their game plan ruined because Eternal Fire found this like new instant T main smoke, which kind of disrupted their game plan. They still got like 4 T rounds and managed to win, but there's still like things that teams are finding that are kind of developing the meta as it goes. So some teams are definitely smarter for holding on to it. And the other thing here is that it's not like Valve removed a map that a lot of teams were playing,
yes,
or that was like a fan favorite. This was a map that a lot of teams were already permabanning. Everyone thought it was going out. So for a lot of people, they can just substitute this into their ban until they're ready to play it and they want to surprise with something else, or if they want to play it later on.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what Blade said. I think it was at Bounty. It was like, we really want to play Train, but because everyone bans Vertigo, like there's no point rushing the new Train pick. Like it gives you that liberty of like a quasi 7 map pool pretty much for like half the top 10 at the start of the year. And I think it's no surprise it's the teams at the bottom of this, like the three worst teams on this list are the teams, well, except Liquid maybe, of course. Got to get some Liquid hate in on this podcast. But it's the 3 teams at the top, the kind of the 3 of the 4 worst teams, and they're the ones that are trying to pick it. And we saw, I think it was a Bounty in Katowice as well. Like every time someone picks it, they just lose. It just happened again and again. It's just like every single time a new map comes into the game, the team that tries to do the risky pick, it's just something just falls apart. But I think one of the ways to pivot this would be, we were talking about the sideways, the diagonal train and back 6 having the left angle. Like I think the reason they've done that is to try and basically nerf AWPers. But the interesting thing is that early on, like AWPers have the highest average rating on this map. If we could go to, I think it's next one, yeah. So I wanted to look at like the average ratings, and it's very early. It's very, very early. These will change. But I think it's really interesting that this is basically the best map to AWP on right now in terms of average rating on a map. Like CT AWPers are having a great time. And like that's intuitive. It's still plays the same way. You're still very able to rotate into B and get 2 kills against XQs and stuff. But it's just interesting to me that they've closed off so many angles on A, and it's kind of at a pro level, at least, not really affected the AWPing supremacy at all.
So are the names below each position like the top 3 players in that position right now? Or how did you categorize this? Okay.
Yeah, so it was to try and get an example of like what type of players play where, basically. But it's the 3 highest rated players with like 5+ maps, and obviously that's quite a small list. 5+ maps, top 30 HLTV teams, basically. And yeah, and Device having a great time, but it's tiny sample size for all of them. Like the names are more, use the names more to work out. Like, oh, Xantares plays Pop Dog or something, right? That's an aggressive rifle position.
More the style of player, yeah.
Yeah, more the style of player than like go watch their demos immediately. But I just think with the AWPer thing, it's like, is it a good goal for a map to try and make AWPing harder? Like because I quite like that different maps have different kind of gimmicks, different strengths and things. And I actually quite liked that, on Train and Overpass and a few other maps, that it's an AWPer's playground, and then you have to adjust how you play. You have to play differently. Like it's an expensive gun. It should be the best gun in the game. And I think it is still, obviously. I just think a lot of the design decisions behind Train, a lot of the ones that kind of feel off intuitively, were based on trying to limit the AWP. Like I think the back 6 one, the sideways Train, they're trying to limit the AWP, and it's not even worked, and it's just made the map worse. So I think, I don't know.
Hey, just stick your AWPer in Pop Dog now to that nice long angle.
Yes.
Yeah, I definitely, if somebody come to me with the map design goal of saying we're going to try and limit like one rifle or make like a area of the map where you can play with, like, we have like the shotgun area of the map or something, I would say that's going to be that's going to be really, really hard to do. But that's also, I guess, like from a design philosophy, I'm obviously not a map maker, but I think there's like, if you think of a map maker as someone who's designing a playground, my fear is always going to be that if you design a playground where you want to control very, very hard how the children are going to play on the playground, you're probably going to end up making a really boring playground, because most of the time for children, like, the fun is in essentially using half the playground how you're not supposed to, like you want to try and climb up on the run roof that you're obviously not supposed to climb up on if you're a child, and like, yeah, like that's, like, I think Counter-Strike is somewhat of the same way. It's like, just give people like a good map where the timings work, and there's some, there are some, fun things that can play themselves out, and then don't try to control what they do with those things so much, would be my opinion. So if that is the case, then I would say that's probably not a particularly good idea. I mean, but you can see how, just in the B bomb side alone, if you think about it, like on B, does it even matter if the T's have enough smokes left? How could you smoke off all of B against an AWP player? Like, they can move like 3 steps to either direction, and they're probably going to be out of the smoke that you threw. And, like, if they're already in position, obviously, if they're rotating in from the A bomb side, fine, you can keep them away. But for a long time, like, there are just some angles where, like, you can't do it the same as you can on other maps, where, like, on Mirage for the A bomb side, you throw the right smoke on the box at CT spawn, and if there's an AWPer there, it's like, unless they want to try and jump up on ticket booth, that they're going to be left on the other side unless they have an HE or something to blow open the smoke with. So definitely a lot harder, even with utility, to get rid of that particular role, which from my point, I think it's fine. Like, I don't have any problems with it at all. I think I agree with what you said. It's fun to have maps where there are just different dynamics, Some maps like Inferno, we just know that like MP9s and Tech 9s are going to be more dangerous because you're going to be much closer, and that's totally fine too, So I'm not against it.
It's basically like in the real world example is when health and safety goes too far. And in Counter-Strike, it's basically like the Gold Nova 2 classic feedback of the AWP's overpowered and I can't do anything about it and there's nothing I can do. And you're basically taking that feedback and then affecting the pro game. Like,
I mean, you say that, but I feel like they've made the map almost like less casual friendly in a way. Because, for example, like, let's say you have a relatively like lower ranked lobby, and you have one person who knows that like T mid smoke T main smoke from CT, you're kind of just screwed for the entire T half if you don't know like how to counter it, or if you don't have a proper team to play it. Whereas like at least before on Train, you could kind of like Train again was like one of the more tactical maps, so it was already a bit difficult for casual players, but you could still pug it out. I think they've removed that component a lot more, especially on T side here.
Although one thing they have done is by changing the way Olaf works, I don't know if this is just me, but old Train, like if you were with randoms on Faceit or something, everyone would just go left out of T main. Yeah. Like at least this design kind of like, if you either have to go forwards like into sandwich, or you have to go right E-box, like a proper entry pathing. Like there's not as much I've got the best spawn, so I'm going to go and sit an Olaf. Like I think that's one benefit of the new change.
They've made a very unique map design choice on this map that I don't think, as far as I can tell, doesn't exist on any other map. And it's also very specific to how the trains work. But obviously in other versions of Train, like in 1.6, you could literally crawl under the trains, which is fun to think about now, like how rough that would be if that was the case. But on other versions of Train, you could also just look under the trains, you're like, there was that ability, and they've specifically designed that out. I don't know if you guys have gone to take a look, but if you look really close to the corners of the trains, they have these one-way invisible walls. That means you're never going to be able to spot somebody's feet at the corner of a train. Like there's a sort of like a little gray barrier at the bottom of the trains. That means you can't do that. And I'm pretty sure that's a choice that's made to try and save new players from having a really awkward experience where, they're getting shot in the feet or something like, or they don't know why somebody always knows that they're there because, their feet are visible on the other side. But that's one of those things where in a way, I would say that is that like weird collision for Valve between the high-level Counter-Strike and the broad, like way, way bigger casual market of, I don't know how many millions of players that play every month, but like a lot, right? But I would say, from my point of view, if I had to only talk to the esports audience, I would say, for me, it'd be very cool to see, exciting duels could really play themselves out differently if you have to pay attention to like what's happening near the corner of those trains? Like, are you visible from a certain angle? You got to be careful about that. Like, for me, that sounds like a fun idea, and like it makes the map more unique. But Valve have very specifically, map edited that away, and I think it's to try and save the casual audience, basically.
Mm-hmm. I think if we can move on to kind of how CTs are setting up, because I think it is really interesting of the difference between lots of teams. And I think, this is Skybox Edge, as Anders knows, very, very good products.
Appreciate it.
Not an advert, but it is very sick. So, a lot of IGLs, because it's an ongoing conversation, right, on every map, is where do you put your IGL? And I think the train one is interesting because nominally, like, they're all Ivy players. Like, if a rifle is Ivy, like, more often than not, it's the IGL in most teams, right? Like, I think there's a few different, like, Mouse have Jimmy there. Obviously Apex, never going to anchor in his life. But mainly it's the Ivy player, but that doesn't mean they need to start the round in Ivy. So this is major, and I think it's true of a lot of other teams, is a lot of the time you have your two aggressive riflers going out, throwing the double nade, double molly into main, and then one goes towards E-box, one goes towards sandwich, like pretty standard, like same way the old train would play out. And then you have your IGL often coming Z connector as well, and AWPers kind of anchoring Ivy. Like on Skybox, they have like automatic positions, right? That's one of the big things they do. But the way the new train's working out, like so many AWPers are Ivy anchors. If you just look at this, like it just says AWPers are Ivy anchors because that is where they start the round. Like you can see a Woxic here every round. Like they think this was maybe their last match, maybe their last 3 matches with gun rounds. Can't remember the exact filter. But there's like, he's in Pop Dog once, that's probably like a full eco or something. And then every other round, he's back 6.
Yeah.
Like every other round. Like sometimes he takes the camera peek, which is like, I guess people call it old bomb now. Or like, I've seen a few different names for it, but it's AWPers starting back lane and then your IGL kind of roaming around. And I just think it's a really interesting way of doing it, is that you don't want your IGL to be an anchor where if he dies, you lose the round. So obviously everyone wants them to be supportive pieces. And I think Train gives this kind of opportunity for someone like Major to be very supportive to Wicadia and Xantares and then go to Ivy late round and mix it up sometimes. But I think this is a really good way of dealing with the IGL, where you put your IGL problem on the new Train.
It also means we have some of the same like replays that we used to have on Train, like going really far back, where people on the T side, they will do the run boost at Ivy to run boost over the scope for anyone that's holding on the CT side, right? Which kind of shows that, because we all remember those moments, I'm sure, from like 1.6 or even earlier, right? You can run boost over the double scope, and that's just for me. It's fun to see that that's still a thing, for new people who've never seen Train before. I notice like in the chat and everything, people go whoa when they see that run boost. But obviously, for anyone that's been around for a long time, you can instantly recognize that's straight picked out of 2013, 14 or whatever Counter-Strike, which is super fun and super cool to see. I think it also does something else, like just specifically having the AWP in this back position by Ivy. It also generates one of my favorite scenarios on Train, is when if that AWP player's attention is drawn away and they start looking yard, or they miss somebody sneaking in through Ivy by even like a few seconds, then the whole round becomes this like incredible drama where there's like one T player that's now behind enemy lines. They can go all the way to T spawn. They can basically kill the B defense if they want, do whatever they want, right? And as the person anchoring Ivy, you might have a very strong feeling all throughout that like I've pretty much held this the whole time. Like I'm pretty sure, but all it takes is for like one smoke or one time where you're like looking yard and suddenly somebody slipped by. So I think it's very interesting. But yeah, I mean, like in terms of the IGL stuff, I think it is. I would argue it's definitely a benefit also just to have your IGL be in a position where the time that it takes for somebody else to give them the info is a lot less, because they basically have all the info firsthand anyway, being in the yard, right? Like like you don't have to wait for, like if your IGL was playing B soloed at the start, then they would have to try and interpret everything that was being yelled to them from the yard, what's actually going on. Whereas if anything's happening early, it is going to be in the A-bomb side every time, so you just know. That's nice.
And one thing for Vitality is, like, it is nice to have the kind of 2 dedicated anchors, like Liquid do as well, where you have JKSB, NAF Ivy, and they just go there every round. And I think, like, just the luxury of having Zio in your team is that the way Vitality play it is they have 2 dedicated specialist anchors, and then they have Apex doing the rotating with all the utility work, And Zoe is basically their pop dog player at the start of the round. Like if he doesn't have an AWP, he's in pop dog, and then they have kind of flamesy towards main. And I think it's just the luxury of having a player like that and the 2 dedicated anchors. Like you can see that's kind of the philosophy behind a team like Liquid or Mouse is basically we'll get around the I don't want my in-game leader anchoring problem by just not having one, basically, and just only having good players. And I think the Vitality approach of just having Zoe is kind of the only way this actually works, like long term, is if you just have someone like Zoe who, when you need a double rifle aggressive setup, like that doesn't need to be Apex taking those gunfights all the time. Like he will do sometimes, but they've got Zoe and Flames taking what's the word for it? Taking point, I guess. And it's just this map kind of develops, there's going to be more and more innovative solutions to where you put your in-game leader, and I think that's one of the most interesting things whenever a new map comes out is just what actually are the positions, what do we call them, how do I get it into my spreadsheet, because it's just every team at the start plays so differently and it's so difficult to actually nail it down. I
mean, so just Vitality specifically, right, have this other protocol that they love to run where, because the T's will smoke the position between the diagonal train and the 6 train, so they're going to be throwing that middle smoke, and they have Flames like running through that and basically being flashed in by his teammates, right? And that I think that's been copied by every other team now. So you have these fights that are happening towards team main that are, I think, very, very hard to beat if you're on the T side, right? Because there are going to be incendiary grenades landing. This guy's going to be flashing his way through the smoke. Like, it just seems like, you know, right at the beginning when the spawns were a little bit further up, it was like an unwinnable battle on the CT side, basically. You were always going to be beat. And now instead it feels like we're kind of headed the other direction, where it's the standard has pretty much been set for how to stop the T's from really doing a lot early on. And that's just interesting to look at. And obviously Saiwu, when he's not playing forward towards Pop Dog, he's setting up these deep nades from C connector that land towards the hallways, and then Robs is playing aggressively sometimes, at least on the B ramp, and like all of that is, to my mind, like super, super interesting. And I think there are even faster ways to do it. And there would be even faster ways to do it if not for the fact that the building near the CT spawn is so monumentally tall that you can't throw anything over it. And actually, it really does annoy me, because if you I mean, maybe it's not a bad idea, but it's just the problem with the building being so tall is it does a number of things. One, it means you can't obviously throw smokes from there. Maybe that's not the biggest deal at the beginning of the round, but actually the problem is if you're trying to retake the B bomb site, you can't really throw any smokes from CT spawn. And also, like I said earlier, there are no corners in CT spawn anyway, so you can't even stand in a corner. It's not possible, right? So it's just that whole part of the map is just a bit weird to me. But I will say, you know, I spent quite a lot of time trying to look at how Vitality play, especially aggressively towards that, you know, back B hallways, pop dog, up dog, whatever area, and like that's an area I think that's where so much of the battle is going to happen in the future. Like you can just tell that, because if you think about it, what do the T's even do if you have that control on the CT side? How much is really left of the map? You know, like you're actually in such a weird position. So I think. I'm curious to see how that plays out in the long run. Yeah,
it's a delicate balance with the spawns, isn't it? Just because,
yeah,
like if you're Glaive and you're 7-13, well, you can't be 7-13 down anymore. But you don't call the Tech 9 A rush anymore because just everyone gets double naded. Like there's just it's like it's kind of just how people are basically better at the game now, and it just shuts down certain calls. Because I think when Train came out, maybe you could say that the T's had too much of the map basically for free. Like if everyone just runs from their spawns in a straight line, like the T's had half of A basically, pretty much. Yep. And I think there's just a balance in, now everyone's learned the utility. I think that's going to be something to keep an eye on. And this is also basically how
moving the spawns back also made it play more like old Train than anything.
Yes.
Because before it felt completely different. Now it at least has like some similarity. Feels like you can be in similar positions, etc.
It's not a pug simulator, and I think this is contributing to why it started as T-sided at the pro scene. But I think I'm not saying misleading, but I think there's a lot of things that are making the game as a whole T-sided at the moment. And I think when Train settles, I think it will be much more CT-sided. So in games between top 10 teams, for example, it's CT-sided like 57% or something. which is different to overall, which is in this chart, which is 51% T-sided, which is like average in the map pool. And I think it's interesting that among top teams, at least early on, there's only like 9 or 10 maps in that sample. I think it's interesting that even with the nerfed Molotovs, there's still potential for a map to be that CT-sided right now. And maybe I like that. I think I prefer when maps are CT-sided, just because I think if you're on the T side, you should have to work hard for rounds. I think that's like a principle of CS almost. Like the game for me should be 52% CT-sided or something. Like just that tiny bit where Lurpus is like, the average half is still 6-6. Why do you care? But just that little bit, that makes the game a little bit more interesting for IGLs to kind of prove themselves in maps like this. So
I think there's also a balance, right? Because like not every map needs to be CT-sided or T-sided. I mean, some can be 50-50, but when you have, I feel like traditionally Train and Overpass were like two of the CT leading maps that were just very enjoyable to watch, because you're always watching out for that tactical side of like the captain kind of leading his team into those wins. Is what made Astralis stand out on Overpass a lot. So it's when you have those kind of maps, you are tested in a different way. And if you just remove that element and you give T's the chance to just like rush repeatedly, or if you give them the chance to get economy control multiple times because it's so broken, it's just gonna not be the same.
Yeah, I mean, I've got super strong opinions about map-sidedness. Like I think, you know, if we took all the Counter-Strike mechanics and all the guns and everything, and we put, you know, everybody on like a Battlefield map or a Call of Duty map or something like that, then I would argue we're really just no longer playing Counter-Strike. Like, it doesn't really matter if everything is the same. Like, the maps and how they play are just such an integral part of what it is to play Counter. And we even know this, just even if we stay in Counter-Strike. Like, if all of us go and play Office or something, like, we're having fun and we're playing Counter-Strike, but we're not really playing the version of Counter-Strike that we think about, like, in an arena. Like, it's just, and that's okay to be able to do that. But the problem is, when we're talking about competitive Counter-Strike, then I think it makes some assumptions, or at least in my head it does. And one of the big, like I made a little video about this, but just to quickly sum it up. I think the problem that I'm seeing is that if a map becomes too T-sided, then for me, that's a very, very strong indication that the more rational strategy actually for the CT side is just to gamble with just roll the dice enough, and then you hope that you get a couple of sixes, and then, you know, those are the rounds that you win. And I just think that's not a very compelling thing to either play in or watch, you know? Like, it's just kind of like, I can't really celebrate if somebody won because they just happened to, you know, in the middle of the round, they said, oh, let's just all four go to the A-bomb site. And then, oh, they shot up A. And I'm like, oh, that's great. We win the round. I feel like there's nothing for me in that. Like, I can't be excited about it at all. Whereas
you see it a lot more on Anubis as well. Like, in man disadvantage situations, teams will just instantly go and stack a site.
Yeah,
if they don't have any info.
It's not because they're stupid. It's because at some point it just becomes more rational to try and do it. We saw it on Cobblestone back in the day. It's one of the reasons why I still don't like Cobblestone, in spite of the. It's also bizarre because the same problem actually does generate really insane end of game rounds where it's like, now you are like, you know, there's so much pressure. So like, that's why people remember Cobblestone for so many good things, because they're like, oh, remember that round? Yeah, like, that's fine. But you forget all the other rounds where, you know, they just tried to stack different bomb sites and it didn't really work out. But the funny thing is, the reverse isn't true, right? Like, if it's a map is really CT-sided, then you are sort of watching a team, you know, try to figure out like all the details of how to do the attack just right, and like, where are the weaknesses, and can we force our rotations? A very different problem for both sides. So listen, I don't mind if maps are 50-50. I don't even mind if maps are a little bit T-sided. That can even kind of work. I wish there was always one map in the pool that was just a lot more CT-sided, and like, I would even say like a 70-30 type split, just because I just think it's fun. But I will acknowledge the issue that Valve always will have in this context is that the broad population of players will hate to play that map every single time. They just always will. So, sucks.
It's funny that, you know, the one map Astralis ban is the one map where Cadian's gambles actually would maybe work. It's probably just not helping them right now. It's like Inferno's not the gamble map anymore, Anubis is, and you just perma-ban it straight away. And yeah, I think I agree with a lot of that. I think you put it into words much better why I think CT-sided maps are the the kind of basis for pro CS.
Just to also say, like, this is something that where, if you do something other than just holding a bomb site on the CT side on any map in the pool right now, if you say, hey, listen, let's stop just standing still, let's try and move forward, and either to hope to just sneak past their line and win the round by shooting them in the back, or by getting information, even if either you spot someone or you don't, but either way, it's great information to know where the team is or isn't. And sometimes doing that on train is like, that's one of the really cool things. Like when the CTs do push Ivy and actually get to look, like if you look down that Ivy corridor and you don't see anyone, I mean, they can be hugging the wall somewhere, they can be tucked away, but in theory, like that's such an enormous amount of information. And I think those moments are really cool. Like I really enjoy that when it pays off to do it. But the problem is on some maps doing that, like Anubis, is so risky, right? Like the risk of walking outside of the A-bomb site into like an open space where it's like there are so many angles to hold, like it can be the risk versus reward thing just doesn't work out. So anyway, that's just another thing that I think about train is like you can do it and it can pay off and it could be risky, but it's really cool when it works, So anyway.
Yeah. I also like maps where you kind of naturally have players playing together. I think one of Anubis's main issues is that basically you need one player on a different choke point all the time.
Yeah.
Like the AWPer and the A player will play in tandem on A, obviously.
Yes.
Sometimes, but then you kind of need 3B sometimes, and it's like the AWPer rotating, and then the 4 riflers playing on their own most rounds. And that just limits, like, if you go for an information play, then you have to give up one really important choke point, and it's just little things like that I think, going back to train, I think that is a strength of train, is that you do have these 2 riflers where it's kind of hard to tell what their positions and responsibilities actually are sometimes because they play together so much and they're able to take a main control together, go through pop together and stuff like that. I think that is one of the strengths of the new train, is that I think when it settles, it will be that CT-sided map that, is still, like, maybe this is actually Valve genius, is that it'll be CT-sided at pro play with all the grenades and everything. And in pugs, you can still run out A and get a 7.5 T-half very easily. Like maybe that's actually just Giga Brain. But this is another interesting point in data is from Leatify. It's the pros are planting more on B than they are on A. And obviously there's lots of reasons for this, because late rounds, it's much easier to plant on B because the anchor would have left and things like that. Like maybe you're still attacking A quite a lot, but not planting on A because it's just, there's 3 defenders there compared to B where there's 1 most of the time.
Yeah.
But I still think this is interesting, and that I don't know I'd love to know what the CSGO data was for pro games. But I just thought this is interesting that teams are able to plant on the small site more, which isn't really true of any of the other maps. Like it's the big site on Inferno, it's the big site on Dust 2, Mirage A again, Nuke. It's kind of hard to say really. Anubis B's the big site, Ancient B's the big site. Like it's the same on all of them except Trade, and maybe this is just too early for this to actually be.
I feel like it has a lot to do with the way Team Mid gets throttled for a lot of the rounds at pro play at this point, because you just have smokes getting refreshed in Team Mid, mollies repeatedly into the left corners if they're not there, if the smokes aren't there. So I feel like a lot of teams get Brown Hall's control, they kind of hold for the up dog push, and then they usually will have like maybe one person towards Ivy lurking. They'll try and take Team Mid, but I feel like every time I watch and I see teams try and retake Team Mid, it works like 20% of the time.
Yeah.
Or you're making so much noise and they've given it up, and then you've wasted like 3 grenades and you have nothing really exec on. So I think that could be why teams are leaning in B a lot more, because at least if you're able to have some of that Brown Hall's control early and you can have a little bit of control elsewhere, it's a little bit easier to actually, like, even if you're going into 2 people, maybe 3 in B, if you're still execing and you're throwing like the number of nades that some of these teams are throwing, you have at least a chance rather than, sitting behind a smoke at team mid or team main for a minute and a half.
It's also, I think, think of how many positions you actually need to be. Like if I'm tasked with planting the bomb in a round on the A bomb site, and I have to be 100% sure that I'm going to survive this bomb plant. Like we need to control like that back of Ivy position, or like the whole way back there. We need to control Pop Dog. We need to control Team Main, like, and maybe even the front of the bomb site, like towards C connector. Like there are so many, like we can't have any CT sneaking in, and that in itself probably means not only do we have to get out into the A yard, but we really have to get there with like at least 4 people alive, and then one of those guys is planting, and the other 3 are going to be, you know, covering all these positions. And like, how often will that even happen? You know, like how often do you, if you trade evenly, if it's like a 3-on-3 and one guy's planting, now you got 2 people, how are they going to cover everything? They can't, you know, like, so, and all it takes is one slip up and somebody walks out of pop dog and suddenly they're shooting your guy, or they happen to be at Ivy still, and then like there are just so many, and I think that is just, it's very hard to overcome, in my opinion. And like you said, at the B bomb side though, it's, you know, it's probably a lot easier. But it would also be interesting to see like the third outcome here, which is how often when you actually go A, do you just win by a really prolonged fight where you just kill everybody and you like the bomb plant doesn't even come into it. Like that could be kind of fun to think about too.
Mm-hmm. It's just the brawl. It's the brawl bomb site. Yeah. Also with breakable smokes, it makes that planting even more hazardous. Like you can smoke off camera in the old train or old bomb or something, and you can plant pretty much anywhere. But it's because it's in the center of the bomb site as well. Like there's just like in pugs, I'm binding drop bomb just for train. I'm just not taking it. But I think B is also interesting in that there's something I wanted to talk to you about, because obviously you've watched the game for so long, is like the kind of art of B anchoring, right? Like historically, maybe Zipix in my head, even though I started watching maybe a bit too late, like 2015, 2016. But like, how do you think on CS2 with the kind of the new ROPS angle as well and everything, like how do you see the kind of the B bomb site? Do you still see it as like a place where anchors can really show off their art?
Yeah, maybe even more than almost any other map, just because it feels like the stakes are just so unbelievably high when it comes to playing, especially if you're playing that forward position that people still do, where they're just holding like an incendiary or a smoke, depending on what's going on. And like the problem is compounded now even more so, because like I've been trying to say to people, incendiaries aren't even real grenades. Like you throw them and people just run through them anyway. Like, so I guess actually, to be fair, on the B stairs specifically, is one of the few places in the game where actually maybe you could stop like a rush by throwing an incendiary, but a lot of other places. But even then, like if you throw it a little bit too deep, or it bounces a bit awkwardly, like that happens sometimes, where like it doesn't just fall into the ground, but like you hit some piece of stairs and then it like bounces up and then like if it's airborne for like a second too long, then they're just going to run through and kill you. And it's worth it. It's super worth it, right? I would say it might even be worth it for them, even if they trade 2 for 1, right? So like, you know, they might still say, well, fine, we're in a 4-on-3 with a bomb down on B, like we're probably going to win that. So it's such a bizarre, you know, position to be in. And also like at the same time, you need to, like, if you get pushed back from that position, you obviously need to call in a teammate, because now you don't control the upper part of B anymore. Like, they can make their way past then you have to fall back, just logically speaking. But then how long do you sort of keep 2 people on the B bomb side? Like, do you eventually say, okay, I just need somebody here while I'm relocating my position, and then I'm going to fall back and do something else? Like, I think it demands so much. And, you know, in the past, like, I mean, this is how people ended up using the actual auto sniper in CSGO early on, because they, you know, it became such a stressful situation to try and hold. And I mean, like, if you're not an AWP player, if you're just a rifler, then actually in some sense buying the auto sniper sort of actually does make a bit of sense on this particular map. So not saying we'll necessarily see it come back, but like it's I think it's like in some ways it's the ultimate test. But you still suffer from some of the same B anchor like trauma that you have on other maps, which is that you can also just end up being really bored for a long time, and then by the time you're called into action retaking the A-bomb site, it's kind of too late, and you're like now, so like you're bored, or you're trying to clutch like a crazy 1 versus 3 or something, you know. It's like, pick one, you know. So there's
usually
that.
Without nades too, because you've had to use them early.
yeah.
And again, I think it's somewhere where just the luxury Vitality have. Like, I think it's having drops
sure.
on B, because, you know, like if you're jiggling that B ramp with a Molotov in your hand all round, like Snacks plays there for G2, I think, or maybe it's Heavy God or someone. But anyway, so hypothetically, if it was Snacks there, I've not checked. You know, one of those jiggle peaks at one point is going to be AWPable, right? But Vitality and like maybe Na'Vi with Bit there, like if you've got a really, really good mechanical player who can jiggle peak perfectly for like a whole minute, like I think that's it's just the specialist anchor role now is one of the most interesting. And I think what Zip was always really good at was like the kind of behind the bomb train, looking at ramp, like, you know, like Under Heaven Like I associate that angle with Zifig so much. And I think there's lots of different places on B where you can really kind of show off like mastery of being able to get one kill and run away. And I think that's one of the most satisfying things to watch, as long as your teams are good at 5v4 retakes, basically.
And Rops is also really good at playing those kind of positions and being able to get one to survive. Also, the fact that he really likes finding nades and finding like ways to set those up helps being a B player, because like, especially now with the way CTs are playing Updog, being proactive in those halls early round and actually trying to take those fights. Some of the early rounds of Vitality were playing with Rops pushing up there and Apex with them sometimes. I think like it's pretty vital. So if you have someone like Rops being able to make those plays and get the kills, but also find different creative ways to do it, like you're kind of set.
It's interesting though that Spirit don't have donk or anchoring the B bomb side, right? Like it's Sontic as far as I can tell instead, which is fine. Like I think Sontic's still a strong player, but you could sort of imagine the insane luxury of basically tasking any opponent with saying you can either go fight, donk, or you can fight 4 people in the A bomb side, and it's like if you have to pay. Like sometimes when I watch Spirit on
donk attacks.
Yeah, this is a community question where people say like, why do people keep picking Dust 2 against Spirit? Some part of me, when I look at how they play the map, especially on the CT side, there's a part of me where I think like, in a way, like, why wouldn't you? Because really all you have to do is like, you just have to beat donk and B and you're probably going to be fine. But like but obviously that's the issue, is like, half the time you're not going to be able to do that. And it's like, it's so in a way, I think it's true, like the map plays differently if you have a certain specialist type player who can do a lot. It is fun to watch, because Robs obviously is a different player from what he was, a couple of years ago. And this kind of like very aggressive style that he's bringing out on the B ramp with Apex, like you said, sometimes is super fun to see. Like I think it's really sick. And I think there might even be more. I'm currently trying to figure out if there are ways to even lock in the T's even more, because I think there might be ways to actually stop them from ever getting out of that hole in the wall that they're running through. Just completely block them from doing it. I think it might be possible, let's put it like that. So if you can beat that timing, then obviously you're... Yeah. Oh man, I spent so much time, like you have no idea. Again, if I could throw grenades from T-spawn, I would be able to land smokes in that hole in the wall for sure. But the problem is I have to run into the B-bomb side to do it. But I can do it from the B-bomb side. The question is, like, will they land in time to stop anyone? And then, like, it's a whole thing going on there. But yeah, I mean, like, I think...
wanted to? Like, if you were Valve, would you want to make the map so it's possible for you to throw that grenade?
It's a good question. I guess it depends. Like, in theory, a smoke, would it be the worst thing? Maybe not, actually. I think it's fine. If it's only smokes, I think it's not a big deal, because in theory, if I successfully throw that smoke, even from CT spawn or something, like, you can use that against someone, right? You could just say, okay, well, fine, if you throw that smoke, what we're going to do is we're going to, boost in the back B hallway, and then we're going to blow open the smoke with, like, an HE, and then we're going to just AWP you as you run out, So, like, there are probably ways to counter it as long as it's a smoke. My other concern is that...
The problem with smoking that hole, though, is that because of the new smokes, the smoke will flood down and cover the steps as well for the T side. So you're just going to have zero control at all.
Yeah.
Even if you boost, like, players can be right up close with the push from up dog.
Yeah, it is it's a powerful thing to try to do. But the other thing that you can do... I'm not 100% sure on the timing yet, if I'm being perfectly honest, but if you run up the ramp with like a Molotov in hand or an incendiary in hand on the CT side, like you're running up the B ramp or the B stairs, you can bounce a grenade off. There's like one of those like construction beams that's in the like towards updog. If you can bounce a grenade off of that and it actually lands up in the hole, like it doesn't land below, it lands in the hole, like, and I think you can do that before the T's can get there. Which again, like, puts, even if you can't run out, because the danger is you might be running into like a double or triple HE. If you stay there for like more than 1 second, that's probably going to happen. But it will still create space so that if you have any player that's coming through Pop Dog, you're going to be able to lock them in like while they're waiting for that incendiary. So like, I think there's a lot of things there. I don't know if So again, it's so hard to change maps with the intention of stopping 1 or 2 or 3 things. Like I just think I can't imagine what a hard job that is. So if I was Valve, I would do the thing that everyone hates about Valve, which I would just wait a really long time until I make changes. That's honestly what I would do too. So
yeah, gather the data.
I think the wildest take that Anders had in this whole part was donk should anchor B on train.
Exactly.
So how far is this going to go? Of the more CS progresses, like genuinely in 5 years, I wouldn't be surprised if the best players in the world are anchors. Genuinely. On CT side, like I know you want all the information and you want to be able to be active and stuff, but if you have your best lurker as an anchor on every map, I think CS is going that way. I think Bit and Rops are shining the light. You want better players in spots like B on train. It's too important.
It also creates like it creates these unbelievably uncomfortable situations, because I say that donk is anchoring B on Dust too, but like sometimes you'll find him on long at the beginning of a round, right? And it's just
I think he's like their mid B player usually.
Yeah, it's like he
rotates. But just like the fact that there are some rounds where he just straight starts A long, and like that's obviously so annoying, right? Like because if you're a pro player and you're swinging long to take a fight, and it's like, oh, this is one of the rounds where donk was there, and I might just straight up, I might lose those fights, and you're like, oh, I happen to sort of like it's just very annoying, right? Because you think, oh, if it had been another round where they hadn't done this, then I would have had a fight against, somebody else. Like it would have been Chopper, it would have been somebody else there who, now I can take that, maybe not Chopper, but it would have been somebody else who I could have taken the fight against, and that might have been, so just I think the frustration of knowing that we have to think twice about attacking a particular site because we know they have a really strong player there, but also it's not a permanent thing, right? So you have to be worried about that. I think it's a fun idea, but obviously it might feel bad to do that because you are also putting your best player on some weird island where they might not do a lot, So
yeah, there's a balance. I mean, some people have talked about like, especially because CS nowadays is all about like most comms videos are just people saying like, oh, B player dead. There's like, maybe you have a specialist anchor and then the rest of the players are fluid. So teams just don't get like one kill gives you too much information in modern CS a lot of the time, right? And I think
agreed.
Dust 2 is one of the maps where that doesn't happen because you can play off spawn so much. But I think that would be interesting to see how it develops, because we know in 5 years it's going to be like everything's going to be doubled down on again in terms of complexity. But yeah, Note's moved on to this graphic. There's not a loads to take away from here, but it's just that
it's an interesting early look, I think.
Interesting early look, and this is our rating and then our round swing, which is like looks at the value of each kill basically and how much that affects value of the round. Like it's very similar to Leatify rating basically. It's HLTV version of Leatify rating with lots of different tweaks in it because we're building it from the ground up and making different decisions along the way. But the point is, it's like it's going to be a key building block for 3.0. So it's your sneak peek basically, and it does correlate a lot with rating. But train so far, it's Orpas and Betas. It's Blame FK Zerato and then Orpas in the top right corner. And maybe this is the metrics fault. Maybe it is. But we'll see when it releases if this is still the case. But I think it's interesting that this is.
You don't make the rules, except you do.
It literally do. I could just like, oh, how do I make Monacy look good this year? But no, it's. Because I think in the case where I won, him being top right is interesting because Fury actually have him in like T-side in-game leader roles. Because obviously T-side in-game leader roles are throwing lots of supportive grenades, which in my opinion is an efficient way to just be a good beta. So just have Case Right and Blame F doing those grenades. And then they get to bait and they get to be last alive in these important 3v3 situations and things that and Train, I think, was it Rugger who said that Train is like a mid-rounders map? And I think that does make a lot of sense in a lot of ways. Yeah. And then you see why it's these passive players and Orpas from some CT stuff we talked about as well. I think that's why they're shining, and I'm going to be keeping an eye on if this continues as we see more training.
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, a good round, if you have the right players for it on train, could easily look like a round where you find a way to trade out. So you're like in a 3-on-3, and then at that point, if you have the right players left and they know how to play, slow enough and don't get panicked enough. I mean, on the T side, it's, you're making, more decisions. I feel like on the CT side, very often the danger is always that you're making way too many decisions in 3v3s, right? You end up walking around a lot. You end, like, because it's weird, but you know, especially like I've been, you know, obviously casting a lot of CCT stuff, and you see it like at a tier 2 level where, you know, sometimes the best thing, it sucks to say, but sometimes on the CT side, the best thing to do is just to stand still and just wait where you are. Like you're already in a position, you're already covering the angle you need to. You don't really have to do more things, but I think there's like a built-in thing in Counter-Strike where you feel like if you're not doing anything for a good 20 seconds, somehow you must be making a mistake. Like it just doesn't, you know, it doesn't feel right. You're like, oh, I'm gonna start doing other things. And I think on a, you know, if you're on a map like Train, it's like if you have a good position with an AWP, then just hold it forever. Like if you're a patient player, just keep doing that. And it, you know, that actually, it might not be the most exciting Counter-Strike, but it might work really well. And on the other side, if you're like a Blamef, who's obviously like you know, at least when Fnatic are playing well, like a really, really hard player to be up against when there's limited time, and, you know, like he's just always ice cold in those moments, which is kind of fun. So I think I could agree with that. That makes sense to me.
To wrap things up, I want to first of all say thanks for coming and talking Train with us. I think it was a lot of fun, and hearing your perspective on some of it. It's always, I think I used to watch your theorycraft videos a lot when I was first starting to follow the scene. And I think it was always fun hearing you like pick out these random, very crazy like pixel smokes and grenades that you would be able to throw. And you're like, what if someone was, you know, standing in this like square and wanted to aim and like flash this tiny angle? And I was like, these are kind of cool. I feel like pros won't adopt it, but then when you see like the evolution of some of the nades that are coming out now, you'd think maybe they should look at some of the kind of opportunities that have been introduced by you. I
actually, just not to interrupt too much, I actually have some fun stories about that. One, this is also why I say pro players generally are a little bit lazy, is because if I can find some of these grenades, then like obviously they can too. Like they, like, you know, I'm not like better at the game than they are.
Assistant coaches.
Yeah, exactly. You know, but like, you know, so people can do it. But what's really interesting, like just it's like a piece of human psychology. Even when you show people like something, even if they agree that it's good, they're like, oh, this actually is really nice. It's like I notice that very often they don't use it anyway, and then it's not until sometimes like 3, 4, 5 months later somebody uses it against the team, and then everybody does it. But it's like you notice that there's a huge time delay where So I have a couple of grenades on Anubis that I know for a fact a lot of teams are going to end up using, because I've, you know, like just maliciously DM'd like 10 different IGLs and said, you've got to tell me what you think about this. Like, is it good? Am I wasting my time? And a bunch of people will come back and say, we're absolutely going to be using this, but none of them are. And you know, it's like, it's very interesting. So like at some point,
saving strats for the major.
I mean, I think it's, again, but also part of it is just that once you've memorized a certain set of grenades, it's like making the effort to go in and re-memorize, like to say like, oh, this one is like 10% better maybe. It's like, yeah, but we also have to spend time learning that. It's like, I kind of get it, but the thing is, once you start losing a couple of rounds to some of those new grenades, you're going to be like, okay, well, now we have to do it. So there's that. And just on the history of Train and theory crafting and everything else, there is like, just as a funny story on Train, like when it first came into Go again, like after it got reworked at some point, I can't remember what year this was, but it would have been like, I don't know, 15 or something. Just to say like what the power is of being more well prepped for a map. Like we were traveling to DreamHack in Tours, I think it was, like the French DreamHack, and I was like, the map basically came out, and I spent like the evening before I had to go to the airport just running around throwing grenades, and I thought, oh, I'm gonna make like this wall of smokes that we recognize from a bunch of different maps. I thought, I'm gonna make one on the A-bomb side on Train, on this new version of Train. Like I want to do that. So I found a way to throw all 3 smokes, and then I took my laptop to the airport with like my video about how to do this, and then I might have uploaded to YouTube, but I don't think anyone cared about that. But I just, I did all this stuff, and then I went to the airport, and I was on the train from Paris to Tours with my laptop, and I happened to sit next to the Hellraisers guys, and I said to them like, hey, what do you think about this, like Angel and these other people? Right? I said like, what do you think about this stuff? You know, do you think this makes sense? And they were all like, yeah, like this is really interesting. And then they went and learned those grenades, and they actually knocked out the French team. I think might have been actually with Apex and some of these other guys. They actually knocked them out of the French DreamHack using basically those strategies, and like just like it's super simple stuff, right? So I just, for me, I spent a lot of time on this. I think it's super interesting, and it's like it is niche, and like in the grand scheme of how to win a whole Counter-Strike game, it's not like obviously be a very boring game if it was like down to who could throw like the one nerdiest smoke or something. Like sometimes none of these things matter at all, and it's just like, you know, and that's fine. But I think it's very satisfying. So yeah, like I just to sum it all up from my side, I'm not really worried about whether or not Train is getting picked a lot right now. I'm really confident it will be in the future. I actually think we're just a couple of months away from that happening, basically.
And then any parting words you want to leave us with outside of the Train map pool, anything like that? Anything personally for you, I guess?
I mean, just I think Train has just a couple of things going for it that you know, that makes it a fun and unique map. Like my favorite strategy still is the fact that you can split the B bomb site through CT spawn by walking Ivy as well. Like I think that's such a long, like slow burning strategy that is like, you can see it. I'm also watching it from like a commentator's point of view, obviously. So like, but you can see that strategy is being set up and evolving. I think it's super sick. I think, yeah, I mean, like the map pool is, you know, I think it's in a pretty decent state. I still think, unfortunately, for me, Dust 2 and Inferno are still some kind of weird maps that I'm not like. But as somebody said at one point, like, it's very hard to get rid of Dust 2 because it just is Counter-Strike, you know. And maybe you don't have to get rid of it, but there's something about how the map plays right now that I'm not a super big fan of. So yeah, but yeah, new maps, like let's get them in there. Like there's a mapping competition going on right now, and there are a lot of really cool maps in there. So we definitely have the mapping community for it. Like those guys are super skilled. Like we just, you know, give them a chance. Pay them, Valve. Pay them more money. Let's go.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks so much, Anders. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah. Cheers, guys.